You're listening to Puma Podcast.
Hi, I'm Tatiana Maligro Puma Podcast, and you're listening to Teka Teka. In this episode, we highlight the stories of persons living with HIV in the country. As the health department records an average of 55 new HIV cases every day, what do persons living with HIV need the most? Since the first case in 1984, the Philippines has recorded over 129,000 cases of HIV. That's according to the HIV and AIDS Antiretroviral Therapy Registry of the Philippines. Health Secretary Ted Herbosa also noted that HIV seems to be a concentrated epidemic among key vulnerable populations. For example, around 47% of new HIV cases are young Filipinos aged 15 to 24. Here are the stories of some persons living with HIV that we got to talk to. To protect their identity and privacy, we won't be using their real names, and their stories are read by members of the Puma Podcast team.
Ako po si Roy, 23 years old. Teacher po ako.
I'm John, 18 years old, and I'm a college student.
My name is Mary, and I am 20 years old.
Before ako na-diagnose, ang alam ko lang ay isa siyang virus. Noon di ko pa kasi alam na positive ako. Parang wala lang kasi sa akin. Na parang okay lang lahat gawin. Na parang walang mali. Na parang imposible na ma-positive ako.
Before, I was not really informed about HIV/AIDS. I did not even know what HIV and AIDS were all about.
Before I was diagnosed, I only knew that HIV was transmitted through sexual intercourse.
John, Mary, and Roy didn't know much about HIV before their diagnosis, so getting tested for HIV never really crossed their minds until they started getting sick of other illnesses.
I decided to get tested for HIV when I got sick of so many different illnesses, and I wasn't getting better. My doctor suggested that I get counseling for HIV/AIDS and get tested.
Nung una, ang aking sitwasyon ay parang hindi na normal kasi nahihirapan ang aking mga doktor na matrace ang aking sakit. Wala na kasi akong ganang kumain at yung pagtulog ko apektado na. Dumating sa punto na parang nahihirapan akong huminga, namayat, walang ganang kumain, naapektuhan na pati ang aking trabaho at dumating yung oras na na-admit hanggang nalaman ko na positive na pala ako.
I got tested for HIV after it was detected when I tried participating in a blood donation activity. I was very worried for myself about what would happen if I don't address it. And it also made me reflect on my past encounters. I felt depression and frustration, but at the same time, there was also acceptance because I should have known that this lifestyle of having multiple sexual partners could lead to this very moment.
Just like Mary, Roy and John also went through different stages of grief when they were first diagnosed with HIV. There was shock, sadness, but eventually acceptance, and a drive to live their lives to the best of their ability.
Madami ang nabago kung i-compare noon. Napakalayo na, marami ng bawal, pinofocus ko na lang ang aking sarili sa pagtatrabaho para pang support sa aking magulang at sa aking mga kapatid. Kaya pinipilit kong magpakatatag at maging positibo sa pang-araw-araw para mabigyan pa ako ng mataas na buhay ng Diyos at mabigyan pa ng chance ang sarili na bumawi.
At first, I was shocked and terribly scared when I found out that I was positive for HIV. But then I prayed to God for healing and acceptance. It was then that I began to embrace the new me. Every day when I wake up, I am thankful to God that I am still alive. With His help, I found the strength to continue taking my meds and face the daily challenge of life.
Despite the strength to continue on to live with their lives as someone living with HIV, Mary noted that there's still this stigma towards PLHIVs like her.
The diagnosis somehow affected my physical, emotional, and the mental aspect of my being. Of course, the stigma within our society towards PLHIVs affects our emotional and mental health because of the negative attitudes and misconceptions of the people towards us. Because of the diagnosis, I now also had this big secret I had to keep. I'm just thankful that I have my sister and my cousin who knew about my status and were very supportive of me with this fight.
The Philippine HIV and AIDS Policy Act of 1998 protects PLHIVs from discrimination based on their HIV status. But a report from Human Rights Watch found that many PLHIVs don't know where to seek to rest. This is just one of the issues that the Philippines faces when combating discrimination against one's HIV status. A report from the Bureau of Working Conditions also names the lack of counselors in workplaces and knowledge of HIV and AIDS not translating into expected outcomes. This means that discrimination still persists even though employees know how HIV is contracted and treated. For PLHIVs like John, hostile spaces like this make it difficult to make a living.
Right now, I live alone. My siblings have their own kids while I'm still studying. It's honestly hard for me to sustain my daily life. I really need financial assistance so we can start a small business, like online selling maybe, for me to survive. The community should also understand that we PLHIVs are not a threat. I hope people are taught how to better approach and communicate with people with HIV.
Luckily, there are so many state-run and private treatment hubs all over the Philippines that offer antiretroviral treatments against HIV for free. These treatments can help bring down one's viral count of HIV to undetectable levels. So, in other words, this is when an HIV-positive person can no longer transmit the virus to other people. But even though these life-saving treatments are free and pretty much everywhere, the stigma against HIV keeps potentially HIV-positive people from getting the treatment that they need, and even knowing their status in the first place. HIV is so taboo that some Filipinos would rather not know whether or not they have it. Roy believes local governments can help break the stigma by normalizing conversations surrounding HIV, and they can start by launching information campaigns to help destigmatize HIV and encourage people to get tested for it.
Malaking pasasalamat ko sa ospital na pinupuntahan ko dahil sa libre na gamot at sa pag-aalaga nila sa akin. Sa mga magagandang advice ng mga nurse at ng mga doktor. Hindi ko malilimutan lahat ng tulong na kanilang binigay, pero siguro sa gobyerno, sana magsama sila ng free psychology session na tulong sa HIV treatment. At sana din mas may educational o information drive tungkol sa HIV.
For Mary, better enforcement of anti-discrimination laws are also important to ensure safe spaces for PLHIVs. She also says that Filipinos can help break the stigma against HIV within their homes by having open and honest conversations about safe, consensual sex.
In terms of assistance, I just wanted to be treated and given an equal opportunity in the workplace. I also just want to be able to support myself and my daily needs. I also hope the government continues to give free treatment, even if leadership changes. The parents of teens should also know how to handle or open up a conversation about sex, because we need to break the taboo of PLHIVs and sex in general.
In an earlier episode of Teka Teka, Dr. Johnny Flavier, the eldest son of former Health Secretary Juan Flavier, emphasized the importance of these spaces. Destigmatizing HIV and having open conversations about sexual health is important because, at the end of the day, people are going to continue having sex, and there's not a lot of credible information that's going around. So these open conversations will equip Filipinos with the knowledge that they need to practice safe sex. Studies show that teens who are able to have these open conversations tend to delay having sex, and they tend to also use contraceptives like condoms to prevent pregnancies and the transmission of various diseases. Breaking the stigma surrounding HIV will prevent it from spreading to more Filipinos and ensure that PLHIVs are respected and accepted by their communities. But more importantly, it also sends a message to the potentially HIV-positive people hiding in the shadows that they are loved and respected regardless of their status, and the people in their communities have their back as they undergo life-saving treatment. As HIV cases spread across different demographics, the government and private organizations are working to make treatments more accessible. But these will only reach the people who need it if we cultivate a loving and accepting community that makes them feel safe enough to seek the help that they need. And that was today's episode of Teka Teka. Firstly, we want to thank Roy, Mary, and John for sharing their stories with us. We hope that their stories gave you a glimpse into their day-to-day life and the needs of the persons living with HIVs in the Philippines. After all, HIV is often called the Philippine silent epidemic. And for many HIV-positive Filipinos like Mary, Roy, and John, they don't often learn of their HIV status until they catch serious diseases like pneumonia or tuberculosis and sometimes even chronic diarrhea. And this is why knowing your HIV status early is extremely important. The CDC in the US, for example, recommends everyone between the ages of 13 and 64 to get tested at least once. So even if you're not into what's called risky sexual behaviors, it's still important to get tested. If you also know anyone who may be hesitant to know their HIV status, or maybe they want to know how they can help PLHIVs in the Philippines, it would also be great if you shared this episode with them. Again, I'm Tatiana Malicro. This episode was edited by Pidoy Blanco. Our Teka Teka executive producer is Jill Caro, and our editor-in-chief is Carl Javier. And of course, don't forget to follow Teka Teka and Puma Podcast on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. Thanks for listening.